Most managers think that conflict is the problem. It's not. Avoidance is the problem, and it's costing your team more than you realize. I once asked a room full of managers to raise their hand if they dealt with conflict on their team recently. Almost every single hand went up. Then I asked how confident they felt about how they handled it. Most of the hands went down. That gap between how often conflict happens and how prepared managers feel to deal with it is exactly what I want to talk to you today. By the end of this video, you'll have a practical, straightforward guide to handling workplace conflict with more skills and a lot less stress. So here's what we're going to cover. Why most managers default to avoidance in the first place. Where to start when conflict actually shows up on your team. What good resolution looks like step by step, and the role of emotional intelligence that it plays in doing all of this well. So let's get into it. The first section, why most managers avoid conflict instead of addressing it. Here's the truth about conflict avoidance. It feels like the safer option. Less risk of drama, less risk of escalation, less risk of disrupting the team dynamic you've worked hard to build. And somewhere along the way, most of us were conditioned to see keeping the peace as a leadership strength. But here's what nobody talks about. The real cost of avoidance is invisible at first. It doesn't show up in weekly metrics or your one-on-ones. It shows up weeks or months later as disengagement, passive aggression, quiet quitting, and eventually someone on your team putting in their notice. They're resigning. Unresolved conflict doesn't disappear. It goes underground. And the assumption that a short-term, visible disruption does more damage than long-term simmering tension is simply wrong. Most managers were never actually taught how to handle conflict, so they default to what feels natural, and what feels natural is simply avoiding it. That's not a character flaw, it's a skills gap, and that's exactly what we're going to close today. Where to start when conflict happens on your team? Well, when conflict surfaces, the instinct for most managers is to jump straight into fix-it mode. But that's often the second or third step, not the first. Here's what I've seen over and over again in my coaching work. More conflict than you'd expect stems from misunderstanding rather than genuine disagreement. Someone assumed something, someone misread the tone in an email, someone didn't have the full picture and filled in the blanks on their own. In those situations, the most powerful thing you can do is simply slow down. The first move is always this. Seek to understand before you seek to resolve. That means setting aside your own assumptions and emotions long enough to genuinely listen. Not just to the words being said, but to what's underneath them. What is this person actually concerned about? What do they need that they're not currently getting? It also means resisting the urge to immediately decide who's right and who's wrong. When two people give you very different accounts of the same situation, don't try to figure out who's telling the truth. Focus on the facts that can be observed and documented, and name what you're seeing without judgment. Sometimes just acknowledging that someone feels unheard is enough to begin shifting the dynamic. Don't underestimate the power of that. What good conflict resolution actually looks like? Well, your HR department likely has a process for managing conflict, and you should absolutely follow it. But don't rely on it exclusively. Trying to resolve human conflict purely through a formula tends to generate eye rolls at best and deep resentment at worst. Your real role as the manager is to create the conditions for a constructive conversation, not just tick the boxes of a process. So what does that actually look like in practice? It starts with listening to understand and not to respond. When someone is speaking, your job is to hear what they're actually saying, including what they're not saying out loud. Paraphrase it back to them. Say something like, "What I'm hearing is this. Is that right?" That single move does more to de-escalate a tense conversation than almost anything else I know. Stay neutral in your language and your body. The words you choose and how you hold yourself in the room are telling both parties whether this is a safe conversation or not. Open body language, a calm tone, and neutral framing matter far more than managers realize. Before you dive into what's broken, find the points of agreement first. What do both parties actually agree on? Start there. It creates a foundation to build from, and it shifts the energy in the room before you get into the harder stuff. Then make the resolution real. Don't walk out of the conversation with a vague sense that things are better. Identify specific action items. Assign clear ownership. Set a follow-up date. A resolution that only lives in a conversation rarely sticks. And finally, look for the human side. Underneath most workplace conflicts is a relationship that has gotten strained. If you can understand the dynamics driving the tension, not just at the surface level event that triggered it, you're much closer to a lasting resolution. One more thing on this. If the situation feels bigger than your experience level, bring in a more senior perspective or your HR team early. That's not weakness, that's good judgment. The role of emotional intelligence plays in all of this. I want to spend a minute on emotional intelligence because I think it's one of the most misunderstood topics in leadership development. Emotional intelligence is not a soft skill. It's a foundational leadership capability. And nowhere is that more visible than how a manager handles conflict. Managers who have developed their emotional intelligence competencies, things like self-awareness, empathy, emotional regulation, and social awareness, are consistently better at navigating conflict. They stay calmer under pressure. They read situations more accurately, and they're far less likely to make the conflict about themselves. Here's something I see regularly in my coaching work. The managers who struggle most with conflict are often the ones who haven't yet developed their self-awareness to recognize how their own reactions are contributing to the dynamic. They're so focused on what the other person is doing wrong that they can't see their own role in it. Beyond self-awareness, it's worth genuinely investing time in understanding the people on your team. How do they think? What do they value? What triggers them? How do they prefer to communicate? This knowledge isn't just useful when conflict happens. It is the foundation of effective leadership in every situation. And here's the most encouraging thing I can tell you about all of this. These skills are learnable skills. You don't have to be a naturally gifted conversationalist to get good at them. You just have to be willing to develop the muscle. Every hard conversation you have, handled with intention, makes the next one a little easier. So on that note, if you want more, I want to leave you with this today. Conflict isn't a leadership failure. Avoiding it is. The managers who build real lasting trust with their teams are the ones willing to have the uncomfortable conversations, even when it feels risky, even when they're not entirely sure how it's going to go. That willingness, paired with the skills to back it up, is what separates a good manager from a great leader. If this resonates with you and you want to keep building these skills on leadership, I'd love to stay connected in two different ways. First, jump on my newsletter over at dangrisoni.com. Every week, I share practical leadership insights for people leaders just like you. No fluff, straight to the point, and genuinely useful. Second, if you're ready to go deeper, come and check out the Thriving Leaders Club. It's my monthly membership for managers and people leaders who are serious about growing. You'll get practical tools, proven frameworks, and a community of leaders who genuinely understand what you're going through. So the link is in the description below. And before you go, drop a comment and let me know, what's the biggest challenge you face when conflict comes up on your team? Can't wait to read your comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Ciao for now.